Good day, everyone. It's a pleasure to join us one more time for workshop number 3 here. We're halfway through the content workshops as of today, and we will begin the process. First, I'll do a few words of introduction, just reminding us all where we are in the process. And then I will turn it over to Sonder for most of the workshop today. So we have now completed the first 2 weeks of our work together. And now we're going to pick up the 3rd week and focus on the 3P value proposition. Again, thinking about our innovation project creation framework, with the completion of workshops 1 and 2, we have really formulated what we suggested was the project concept, the basic idea, the approach to innovation, the problem that we're looking to solve. And now, as we move into the next workshops, we're really going to be focusing on proving the potential of the concept. And so all of the next 3 workshops, in essence, lay out 4 different kinds of tests about how are we really going to be prepared to take this concept that we now have and move it ever forward towards an implementable project in time. And obviously, as you well know, our last workshop will be focused on presenting various project ideas that have been developed during the workshop series. And just to remind you all, even when we're done, there's lots more that can and will need to be done to move the prospectuses that we're developing here on to full programmatic launch. So with that setting of the stage, I will turn it over to Sonder.
Okay, thank you, Chris, and good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, everyone attending this 3rd session. And as Chris just indicated, we're going to talk about the triple P, people, planet, profit, and especially about developing a triple P value proposition. And I remember Salome asking a question last week, what that triple P actually means, and that is what we're going to talk about today. You can see this workshop as a first try and a full exploration and testing of how your innovation ID meets principle 1 of the global university. And in order to do so, we need to move to a deeper understanding of how your ID moves the trajectory of each of these P, these people, planet, profit. And last week we talked a lot about innovation, about the types of innovation that you can encounter, and we especially talked about how different types of innovation can more or less impact sustainability. And you might remember this chart showing that just improving a product does not have a big impact in terms of sustainability. But what does have a big impact in terms of sustainability is system innovation. And last week we talked a lot about what system innovation is and why it is that system innovation is best equipped to deal with those challenges related to sustainability, and system innovation projects have the biggest impact on the sustainability trajectory of your metropolitan food system. So we already talked about sustainability, and I'm pretty sure you all know quite a lot about sustainability, but we haven't gone into it in great length. So that's what I'm going to do today. So what is sustainability? And I have come across a number of different definitions about sustainability. Um, Many of you know that maybe sustainability it finds its foundation in ecology, and in ecology, sustainability is how biological systems endure and remain diverse and productive. And while ecology is its foundational domain, since the notion of sustainability, it has broadened considerably. And since 1980s, sustainability has been used more in the sense of human sustainability on planet Earth. In the 1980s, it was primarily about reducing negative human impact. So still a focus on ecology, a focus on what humans do that sort of threatens that ecology, that threatens their own sustainability, and focusing on how to reduce the negative impact of human actions. We talked last week also about that sustainability is not a fixed state but a dynamic notion, and that notions and perceptions about what is more or less sustainable differ from situation to situation, from location to location, and also in time and depending on the person you're talking with. And in the last few years, sustainability has most often been used in reference to the concept of sustainable development. And sustainable development is a concept that was developed by the Brundtland Commission. Brundtland was the Norwegian Prime Minister, Miss Gro Harlem Brundtland, and she was asked by the United Nations to chair a committee, the World Commission on Environment and Development, and come up with a report that gave some recommendations on what to do with the environment on one hand, and the ambition, the aspiration to have an ongoing economic development of our world. And people really thought that there was a conflict between the two. A follow-up report was called Limits to Growth. So the notion of sustainability at that time was one that if you invest in being more sustainable, it will probably hinder your economic development. It will sort of threaten your economic development. It is really meant to do less economic development in order to preserve your ecology. And Brundtland was the first who said, no, it's not so much a matter of conflict, it's more a matter of finding the right balance. And she said in that report, in the report Our Common Future, sustainable development is development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. And this is I think the most well-known definition of sustainable development. It's not a very smart definition in the sense that you can easily measure it. It's more a qualitative definition, but it is one that's being used wide over our planet. That World Commission on Environment and Development had, of course, two components in it, and I talked about it already: environment and development. And this committee said that the environment is not just our ecology, but this is where we live. And development is what we all do in attempting to improve our lot within that abode. And they said the two are inseparable. Striking for the Brundtland Commission is that they insisted upon the environment being something beyond the physicality, going beyond that traditional school of thought to include social and political atmospheres and circumstances. So it also insisted that development is not just about how poor countries can ameliorate their situation, but what the entire world, including developed countries, can do to ameliorate their our common situation. And Brundtland was the first to talk about these three domains, the domains of planet, people, and profit. And she said that if you are looking for a more sustainable trajectory. It is about finding a new or a better balance between these three domains. So if we look at those three domains, you see the green circle, it says environmental. Environmental sustainability. This is where it all began, talking about natural resource use, about environmental management, pollution prevention, all about preventing that we harm our ecology, our environment. This is the what we call, going back, the environmental sustainability, the first domain. Second domain being the economic domain. The Brundtland report was about economic development. So of course a lot of attention was given to the economic domain, the development in terms of profit, but also in terms of cost saving, economic growth, research and development. And that third domain where Brundtland said this is about everything we do and about who we are, there's also a very important social domain. And that social domain and the red circle of sustainability stands for things like education, community, standard of living, equal opportunity, but also human rights and diversity. And when the Brundtland report talked about the balance between the three P's, this diagram helped them a lot, where they said, of course, these are separate domains, separate spheres, but they are interrelated and they often overlap. And when you look at the overlap between two of these domains, for instance, the overlap between the social domain and the environmental domain, you can come up with issues like health and safety, environmental justice, natural resources stewardship. When you think about the overlap between economic and social issues, you can come up with employment, training and development, fair trade, workers' rights, business ethics. Issues that matter both to the economic domain and to the social domain, you find them in that overlap. And same for the eco-economic or the environmental economic overlap. But that real balance that Brundtland with her commission was looking for, that real balance is found where all three domains overlap. And that's that middle almost triangle where it says sustainability, because then you're dealing with issues from all three of the domains. And something you do in that domain will have impact on all three domains. So these are other words than the words that we now use when we say triple P, because then social is of course the P of people, planet is the P of the environmental thing, and economic has the P of profit. So that's where the three P's come from: people, planet, profit. And then sustainability, if we are talking about sustainability or sustainable development, we are talking about the triple P or the triple bottom line or 3P. I really hope this sphere, this diagram of the three spheres of the sustainability helps. Salome, good day to you. I hope you are able to follow our webinar, and hope this also addresses the question that you raised last week about what sustainability or sustainable development or triple P means and means to our work. I'm going to skip this one because I want to talk with you about why triple P, why sustainability is especially important to our work. And I like this quote from a person, Albert Bartlett, who said the greatest shortcoming of our human race is our inability to understand the exponential function. And especially in our work, this exponential function is critically important. You have probably all seen this slide before. I've used it in numerous presentations, and the diagram on the right is one you see in many books and articles. It's the projected development of our world population growth. In 2011, we had more than 7 billion people on our planet, and according to the latest scenarios, we will be with 9.2 billion people by 2050. So yes, we are with many, and you see that exponential function. You see that here in this chart, and this poses huge dilemmas for our metropolitan food system, but not only because we are with many, but also because we tend to live more and more in cities. And this is another picture, you've probably seen it all before, and you know the data that since 2007 more than half of the population is living in cities, and by that same 2050 more than 70% of the world population will be living in cities. And many of those 9.2 billion people will be living in megacities, very large cities with millions of people all concentrated on a tiny piece of land, and with huge impacts and huge needs in terms of the metropolitan food system. So this is why I think sustainability is something that we can't do without in our work. I like this picture of just a large group of people because this indicates for me that indeed we are with more people. It is about more food. We have to feed all these mouths. And all these people have different needs in terms of what kind of food they need, depending on their income, depending on their race or their social status. And it's also more competition, because it's not everything is more. There is a lot less too. There is less space. We have to compete for space, especially in that metropolitan environment. Space is scarce, even I think in Detroit, where you now have a lot of barren land, but space will be scarce and it will be heavily competed upon. What are you allowed to do with this space? Are we allowed to use space for food production, or will everything have that same urban function if it's housing or infrastructure? And will we think about food production only as space far away from the cities? That will hugely impact our metropolitan food system. There is of course competition for other resources too. Water, energy, to name a few, but also nutrients, of course. Phosphate will again be a very interesting challenge, and maybe one of the fiercest competition if it comes to phosphate for food production. And there's also less trust, because in an environment, in a society that is characterized by so many people, you know people far less good, and relationships become tedious and thin. You can't oversee what's happening in that system, so you might not trust the systems that are developed for such a large megacity. And a lot of people have lost their trust in the globalized food system. So this is something we have to deal with. And just by showing you this picture and talking about the mores and the less, I've already touched upon several of the three domains that are related to sustainable development. A key thing is that we have to do more with less. That growing need for food and other agricultural products, because we also need wood to build houses, and we need the water that's purified by our natural systems, and we need green space for fresh air and for recreation. But we need to expand production with 100%, while at the same time using only 50% of our current resources. And many people fear that without a complete shift in our metropolitan food system, the picture that you see on the right, the cloud forest, that those environments will suffer from the growing need for food and the growing demand for food. So in order not to do that, we really have to find new solutions. So our challenge is not just about growing food, about higher yields, about new technology that boosts the number of pounds you get of a vine of tomatoes. It is about all the values that are related to our food system, including values like trust and transparency, intangible values that I talked about last week too. It's not just about food security or food insecurity, but it's also about addressing that whole system of food related to the city, including things I mentioned before: quality, safety, water, energy use, but also employment and income and community building and relationship development. So this is also not something that any one stakeholder already knows what to do. If we knew what to do, we probably would have done it already. But we are stuck in the old system, and none of us, at least not one of us alone, can break out of that system. So this is not something that one stakeholder can do alone. You don't know how to do it, and we can't do it alone. Because what do we see happening now if we go back to sustainability and sustainable development? While Brundtland talked about finding a better balance between the three P's, often when we are talking about things happening in our metropolitan food system, we are saying we are not talking about a better balance. There is a bigger debate between the three, and a stronger competition between the three. It seems to be profit against people, against planet, and it looks as if the three domains might move further away from each other instead of closer to each other. For a long time, I think, especially in the business arena, business people have thought that we will lose our profits. It will be very bad for our companies if we need to invest in people and planet values. Let the government take care of that. We are here to make a profit, and that will help people stay employed, and that's good for society too. But all the other values, they are not in our ballpark. Someone else deal with that. Well, I think what we are all here trying to do is trying to connect these domains, trying to connect these dots again, and really find that better balance between people, planet, and profit. And we think that, and I think when I talk to almost each and every one of you visiting you in your own city, you talked about using that energy of ambitious people, of innovative people, of inspired people to turn these dynamics of the three domains moving further apart around and really finding a better balance. So we were all looking for ways to connect values to create that added value that I talked about, for instance, when I talked about the example of the Rondeal eggs in the Netherlands. But it is important to realize that when you're doing this, if this is what we're trying to do, there was not one single solution, of course. This is not just about everybody starting to farm for themselves in their city, in their own city, whether it's on their balcony or on their rooftop or a piece of land next to them. This is about developing a broad portfolio, of different results and solutions. But the characteristics of that portfolio should be that all the projects in that portfolio should really aim to connect these three domains and find that more sustainable trajectories for development of the metropolitan food system. And it's also, of course, important to realize that this work is never done. This will be a continuous process of improvement. That's why we are talking about sustainable development. The development part also indicates that this is a trajectory, and of course we can aim for the best, but a better step is also good enough maybe when we are on a trajectory of sustainable development, as long as we agree that this is a process of continuous improvement. So I've talked now about Triple P, about our challenge, and I've briefly touched upon what we have seen happening in history, where the three domains were almost drifting further apart instead of finding a new balance. But in the last few years, and especially I think in the last 5 to 10 years, innovation has been dominated has been driven by sustainability. And a lot of business literature really focuses on why sustainability really is that key driver of innovation. And I want to show this picture and the 5 stages that are in here, because I think it helps to talk about how businesses are trying to cope with the challenges related to sustainability and sustainable development. And this is from an article already from 2009, the Harvard Business Review, a well-known business management journal, and 3 people wrote an article there, and they talked about the 5 stages of sustainability and innovation. And I think it helps to share with you how this is. The first stage for many companies is about compliance. Of course, we have by now quite a number of laws and standards and rules that businesses and others have to adhere to. But as always, these standards are the lower standards. And in the first stage of sustainability, you see that companies are just trying to adhere to these lower standards as possible, as long as possible. They believe that that doing what is that doing anything more than that a lower standard will mean higher costs. But what is the reality is that doing what is required often just results in additional costs. Maybe not on the short run, but especially in the longer run. And another important finding is that doing more than just those lower standards can give a business a competitive advantage, because the products or services are distinct from others. So I think you see more and more businesses moving away from just compliance, just being compliant to the lower standards that have been set by governments. And then the second stage a business goes into, and you can exchange business for projects here. The second stage is that businesses start looking at their value chains in order to make the value chains more sustainable. The picture on the right is an example of how BASF, a well-known chemical company, looked at eco-efficiency by comparing locally sourced apples to imported apples. So they were really looking at the whole value chain, from the production of raw materials, the production of fertilizer, crop protection product, cultivation, transport, storage, cooling, and allocation in the supermarket. They looked at that whole value chain, and were because they were more proactive about the environmental issues, and they were especially looking for cost efficiency by reducing all the costs that are related to resources, whether it's energy, water, nutrients. Think about lower kilometers. Is that what really helps them to be more become more sustainable? but how does it compare then to the higher CO2 that comes with storage? So all these kind of questions are being targeted by companies that trying to make their value chains more sustainability, and this results in increased levels of efficiency extended in the whole value chain. So a next step in the development, in the sustainability development of companies. The third stage is when companies start to design sustainable products. And that often comes from the recognition that many consumers prefer products that are eco-friendly, take into account social issues, or adhere to higher ethical standards. But in order to design a more sustainable product, you really need to understand consumer concerns. And you have to carefully examine how these concerns relate to the entire life cycle of their product. So this requires two things. A better understanding of your product, that life cycle, and then stage 2, when they looked at their whole value chain, really helps. And an instrument often used is life cycle analysis, LCAs. But another critical component is user-producer interaction. You need to know, you need to communicate with your customers to understand their concerns. The picture on the right, an eco label, whether it's on your freezer or your microwave, your dishwasher, or your t-shirt, it's an indicator of the life cycle analysis that has been done for that particular product and how this product performs in relationship to others. So this will help consumers pick a more sustainable product. It will also be a motivator for companies to design a more sustainable product. Then stage 4 of really the latest years is companies starting to develop new business models. They start to consider novel ways of capturing revenues and delivering services, especially in cooperation with other organizations. And the picture on the right is about coffee, but coffee that is developed in cooperation with an NGO, the Rainforest Alliance. Not only have they certified this coffee, but they really helped to say what do you need to, how do you need to produce your coffee in order to get this certification, and how can we help organize the production in such a way. So there's really a type of partnership between the Rainforest Alliance and coffee growers, and the same goes for instance, the World Wildlife Fund and H&M, the textile company, or between in the Netherlands the World Wildlife Fund and one of the larger energy producers. So you see these new partnerships, not only partnerships within the value chain, but also with new stakeholders, NGOs, governments, to really find new business models. Because, for instance, with the Nestlé program for sustainable coffee, that's a program developed by Nestlé. You might know them from their coffee and their Nespresso machines. They too work with NGOs, and part of the revenues of the Nestlé coffee go into that Nestlé coffee program and are helped to shape and develop the local economies of the coffee growers, for instance, in Costa Rica. This requires exploring alternatives to current ways of doing business, as well as understanding how companies can meet consumers' needs differently. So again, a strong focus on consumer-producer interaction, but also a strong focus on these new partners in your value chain and outside your value chain that can help shape your business model in a different way. This is still about doing the things better. This is not about complete redesign. completely new ways of producing food. This is about improving, for instance, that value chain of Nestlé coffee. The final stage is now the stage in which we're in, I think, or at least the stage we're trying to become successful in, and that's stage 5, the stage of next practice platforms. The difference between stage 4 and stage 5 is that in stage 5 we are really looking for new practices that change existing paradigms. So it's not just about improving your product, it's not just about improving your value chain, it's not just about improving your business model. This is about creating new practices that change the existing paradigm, that really change or innovate our system. But in order to do so, we really need to question the implicit assumptions behind current practices. And a lot of those discussions are often kept under the table or swept under the rug. I don't know how you say that in English. So this is a completely different mentality and a completely different approach to business development, because it's not just about looking at your value chain or your product and what can we do better. This is about why do we produce like this, and what if we started again, knowing what we've learned all these years, and if we were to completely redesign it, how would this look like? That requires new spaces for creativity and innovation. It requires experimentation more than just implementing solutions or, I hate the word, best practices. And this is all built on the notion that we've seen before when it comes to sustainability. No one can do this alone. And I see Renee is typing a question, so I'll and yes, this requires high trust in a relationship. You're absolutely right, Renee. This is also why it is really a platform. This is not a loosely coupled group of people or a one-trick roundtable discussion. This requires to invest in relationships, and this requires you to really work on trust building and team building. It also means you have to define a common ambition, despite your different values, despite your different interests, but you have to find a common ground or a common dream to work from. That can be the fact that you all realize that this exponential function is something that we really need to talk about, or that you've all stumbled upon one big obstacle. But again, this is about finding more sustainable ways forward, changing the sustainability trajectory of products and processes and activities, and it requires all, because I think in this metropolitan environment everything is connected. We can act as if we are not connected to each other, and we can try to behave as if we are on an island in that big metropolitan area, but we are not. Our metropolitan system is highly interconnected and thus inevitably involve all these different stakeholders. So we have to do this together. And that is why also in business literature now these next practice platforms are getting more and more interest. And I think with the university, what we're trying to do is organize such platforms, both on a local or a city-based level as on a global level. People often ask me, is this the same as corporate social responsibility, this working with a next practice platform and working on sustainability? And I would say no. I'm looking at Renee's question. How did you manage to focus more on experimenting than on implementing, the tension of doing something with doing something different and taking time to do so. Renee, this is, I think, session 5 of this series. Then we will talk about experimenting in action, and we will go into that in your question in a lot of detail. So if you're okay, I'll just park that question for now. So is this corporate social responsibility, CSR? And I think that's been a buzzword for quite a long time. And I would say no, this is not CSR. Sustainability requires much more than CSR. CSR is, in my words, doing well by doing good. And there's a lot of philanthropy behind it. Often CSR is on the margin of what companies do, not at the center. And some of the worst examples are company executives going out on a Saturday and painting a few houses in a village in Africa, after which they will spend the time in a nice luxury resort and fly back to their offices, and nothing changes their daily routine. So CSR is not good enough. CSR also is primarily about responsibility. I feel responsible for other issues than those directly related to my business, and I want to show them that I care. But that's something completely different, even though it can be good and it can be important, but it is not about creating value. And finally, corporate social responsibility puts the company central and in the lead. Not creation, not multi-stakeholder creation. So it also means that CSR, while it has had some good impacts, and while there are certainly companies that have done beautiful things, but the systemic impact, the impact in terms of sustainability is very low. So a nice step, but certainly not what we're looking for. Another interesting concept, it's been around now for almost 2 years, also published in that Harvard Business Review, is a concept called shared value, creating shared value. The article that coined this concept was written by that same person that I talked about in my previous presentation, the innovation professor, Mr. Michael Porter, and the subtitle of his article is "How to Reinvent Capitalism and Unleash a Wave of Innovation and Growth." It's all based on the idea that we can create economic value in a way that also creates value for society by addressing its needs and challenges. And of course, that looks much more than CSR on what we are advocating from the university. First, it is about value creation, and it is about addressing other values too. Values that matter to society, and my interpretation is that could be both people values and planet values, as long as they matter to society. The other interesting thing about creating shared value is that it really positions business in their own realm. Businesses acting as businesses, not as charitable donors. So other than CSR, where it is often the activities are not related to the core activities of the companies, creating shared value, CSV, really is about that link to the primary activities of companies. But it still puts businesses central and in the lead. It is about multi-stakeholder participation. They can be asked by a business to join in, and a business can look at its environment and see what they think that society or their environment needs, but it's not often about real engagement. And the real ambition, of course, is economic value first, and then also creating values for others. So I would argue that even though this has a far better balance in terms of the three P's, this is certainly not yet an optimal balance, and the only way for striving for a real optimal balance is if we are ready to develop these next practice platforms where business is not in the lead but is a critical stakeholder, actively joins forces with the others but on an equal basis. Because in my belief, and I think in the belief of many of us working in the university, it is really about equal partnerships. So creating shared value, I think it's a very important concept, and it has shifted many people thinking, especially in that business community. But I think we're one step further than that. It also means that our ambition is even harder than just creating shared value. Talking again about system innovation. And trying to sort of recap some of what we've talked about in workshop 2 and some of the things that we've talked about today. If we say we want to innovate our metropolitan food system, maybe we can give a few characteristics about what that new metropolitan food system might look like then. And I think that our current food and ag system is for a large part still driven by cost efficiency. The economies of scale really shift our attention to even further cost efficiency. And while there are a few niches, of course, where other things and other approaches can prosper, it is still primarily about cost efficiency. In the metropolitan food system that we think of, the main driver is triple P value creation. Not profit first and then the other two second, but really hand in hand. That real balance between people, planet and profit. It also means that where our current food and ag system is really about an orientation on that business value chain, the metropolitan food system inevitably has an orientation on a much broader value network, where not only the values of traditional chain partners are relevant, but also the values expressed by other stakeholders. NGOs, communities, academics, governments, they all matter too. The current food and ag system is moving even further away from cities. Because of that strong competition for resources. And there's this risk that it will completely be separated from its urban environment, both physically, spatially, but also culturally. And when we talked about trust as something that's diminishing, that has a lot to do with our food and ag system being organized far away and from the perspective of urban consumers in a black box. The metropolitan food system that we inspire is completely integrated into our urban environment. Not only because we like to know where our food comes from, but also because we see that agriculture can be a very broad urban function. In not just food production, but also in terms of its water purification, green spaces, recreation, energy production. Agriculture can really be an urban function. So it has a lot of reasons to integrate it into the urban environment instead of organizing it far away. Our current food and ag system is developed through optimization. Many of the innovations that has shaped our food and ag system have been improvements, incremental improvements or product innovations. So we have optimized our system. I think the downside from optimization is that you only look at, or you often only look at one aspect, one component of a product, namely that one that you try to improve a little bit. But then you often completely miss the other opportunities that that are around that, and you're only tweaking one aspect, and most likely when you're tweaking that aspect, you will make things even worse on another aspect. Our metropolitan food system would be developed through complete redesign. That's why I believe that the metropolitan foods system really needs these next practice platforms, where we not only tweaking products and services, but are really trying to redesign it. And where finally our current food and ag system has led to large uniformity, we think that it's really time to celebrate diversity and to create room that sort of sponsors and fosters that diversity, because there is not one single solution that will make our whole metropolitan food system more sustainable. It's really about a whole palette of approaches, depending on what type of consumers, in what type of circumstances you're trying to reach, and what needs that particular consumer or citizen has. I want to share that same example with you that I talked about last week, namely Rondeal eggs, and their triple P value proposition. And I hope that by illustrating that, what I've talked about before really falls into place. So the traditional innovation strategy in the laying hen sector was that, and give some examples of diversity. Well, Renee, I was trying to refer to that, for instance, supermarkets normally had only one type of beef. And of course different cuts, but it was one type of beef. While if we're looking now in the supermarkets in the Netherlands, there's a whole range of types of beef. From Argentina, grass-fed, locally sourced, from cows that have been in the meadow, all different kinds of beef. And Rondeal eggs, the same diversity. When you look at the shelf now in the Netherlands, there's really a whole range of different eggs that all have a different value proposition to it. So what Rondeal did is they moved away from that cost price strategy, and they really went looking for added values, and that value addition strategy is one that fits well with, and thanks John for your comment. That value addition strategy is one that fits very well with that triple P notion, because the values they thought they could add were values that mattered to consumers, people values, and values that mattered to some of their other important stakeholders, for instance their local community, for instance environmental NGOs, and they tried to add those values to their value proposition. And of course their ambition then is not just to create an egg with a higher margin, but also an egg that that created value for all these different stakeholders too. And in order to do that, they redesigned their whole system from the perspective of happy chickens, happy farmers, and happy consumers. And the value proposition of Rondeal started with the people values. How do our consumers want their eggs produced? And for that reason, they went looking for ways to make their production system animal friendly, more transparent, and farmer oriented, because a lot of consumers said, we don't want industry eggs, we want a farmer to take care of the chickens that lay the eggs. Of course the farmer also had some important values. He wanted to manage it alone. He wanted to make a good living and in good working conditions. They added planet values to it, because they looked at their emissions, they looked at their energy use, and they looked at the materials that they used. For instance, you might remember that the packaging from those Rondeal eggs was a box made of coconut fiber. And they did so because this was a much environmental friendlier material, easier to recycle. And they also, of course, focused on the other P, the profit P, looking for higher margins. They looked for ways to become a preferred supplier with that contract with Ahold, the Albert Heijn supermarkets I talked about, and also they looked for lower risks. For instance, with that contract where they have a fixed price for the egg, but with only the food price making a difference on the final price of the egg, the feed price. So where in our old thinking we might think that if I'm gonna produce in a much more animal friendly way, I have to invest, and this will probably result in a lower margin because my costs will go up. What Rondeal showed is that the values in this case really acted as complements, and there was no trade-off between these values. And that is what we are aiming for when we talk about a triple P value proposition, where the different values from the different domains really emphasize each other and act as complements instead of trade-offs. When we were working in Transform with our different projects, we of course had 30 different practice projects, and all of them were aiming at something different and working we're working in a different sector. We had the laying hen sector, but we had greenhouses too. We had dairy. We had no, won't name it. So the sustainability performance of these different projects were very difficult, of course, to compare. And I think we haven't even tried to do it. There is not one single set of criteria that you can use to measure the triple P performance or the sustainability performance of one project. And as I talked about before, sustainability is not a fixed state. So if we say that something is sustainable now, that is because of our current beliefs, our current understanding of the system, but also our current opportunities to do something else. And in a year's time, we could say, well, this is no longer sustainable. Something else is much more sustainable now. So again, that emphasizes that sustainability, sustainable development really is a dynamic concept. But still we wanted to show that our projects were performing much better in terms of sustainable development than current practices. So how did we do that? And I want to talk with you about assessing triple P performance, and that can be something that you with your project also want to do, and probably I'm going to ask you to do so in your assignment. So what we did is we said it is about changing the sustainability trajectory of a project. So there is of course a baseline scenario that you could see, well, if I'm working in a laying hen sector right now and I have an egg farm there, or a broiler farm, I have a farm there, my baseline scenario, my baseline development, I can give a few characteristics of what will probably happen in the next 5 years. If I do nothing completely new, if I just keep performing the way I do, the market will ask a few new things from me, maybe my investors will ask a few new things from me, but that's a baseline scenario. Rondeal, let's stick with Rondeal. Rondeal decided to change that trajectory. He said, we do not want to just follow that baseline scenario. We want to be very distinct from others. We want to be distinct on our sustainability performance. So what Rondeal did, and I showed it to you before, was looking at these different values. But they also thought about how can we assess then our performance. And they made a list of sustainability related aspects that mattered to their project, to their business, in their context, in their value chain and their value network. And I'm pretty sure that that set of criteria or that set of characteristics will be very different for each of you and for each of your projects. Because again, this is very dependent on your location, on your country, on the type of project, the type of consumers that you're trying to reach, etc., etc. But we asked all of our projects to come up with a list of criteria that mattered to them, to their project. And of course, the fact that we all these projects were being run by multi-stakeholder teams, it gave us enough trust that really all the values that mattered were taken into account. And of course, we had the project directors of Transforum keeping a close eye to that, and they were very keen on whether some of the values that might matter were being ignored. So we made a very specific list for each of the project, and we just looked at, will this project change the trajectory of the normal development. So for instance, if it came to landscape, will Rondeal perform better than the traditional normal development? And we scored each project on all these characteristics. And we tried to give them a color. So we said it's not so much about being very quantitative about the development, but it's about a combination of quantitative and qualitative assessments, and that's why we used colors. We gave a yellow color for everything that was neutral in relation to the baseline scenario, a red color where if there was a negative in relation to the baseline scenario, of course a green color if it was very positive in relation to the baseline scenario, and we used a purplish grayish color for values and characteristics that were really relevant, but we had insufficient data, both quantitative as qualitative data, to score. And of course, by assessing it in this way, you are almost shaping the agenda for that continuous improvement of in this case the Rondeal, and that is precisely what happened. The second Rondeal that was built had a few of the yellows were turned into green. One of the purple characteristics was now a yellow because we could find something. So this assessment really helped in that continuous improvement that's so crucial to sustainable development. This is not very easy to read. This is the list of local impacts of the Rondeal project. And what I was hoping that it would show is that we really looked at these three domains: the people domain, the planet domain, and the profit domain. And if we look at the people domain, the first 7 rows, I think it's 7 rows, we also made a distinction on level. There was an in-company level where we, for instance, looked at human rights, labor conditions, animal welfare and health. A community level, and both a community level in positive and a community level in negative. So community development and involvement was a positive value we were aiming for, and community on the community level, human health and animal disease groups we were looking for to prevent those negatives. Same for planet and for profit. We also looked at potential global impacts of the project and even potential system impacts of the project. But I only gave you the list of impacts that we scored for at the Rondeal on the local level. So 17 different indicators, and of course these indicators, these are still very general indicators. We elaborated upon these indicators with these lists that the local project teams made. So human rights were of course further defined into, okay, but what does human rights then mean for this project? Or biodiversity on the level, on the planet level, in the surroundings, not on the company but in the surroundings. What does it mean then, biodiversity or landscape? And we used those things to score, and this is the type of list that came out, and we translated a list like that to the chart that I showed on the previous slide. So this helped us assess the sustainability performance of our projects. And as you can see, there's almost always something that's not good enough yet. So there's always room for improvement. Whether things are still yellow because there's no difference, for instance, in terms of the biodiversity on the company, or the fact that there's a red indicator, namely on the investment. And you could all realize that a project like Rondeal requires a huge investment, so this is an honest way of showing the sustainability performance of your project. And maybe an approach like this will also help you to think of what type of performance you're hoping your projects will have, and think about what values then, other than the traditional values, your project can create. Values again in terms of the 3 P's: people, planet and profit. So lessons of today, and I know that I've talked now for a little more than an hour, and Chris and I decided to do so because we were in the situation that we had to skip our coaching session of last week. So I promised Chris that I would try to keep my presentation short in order to have ample time to focus on one of the or a few of your questions. But before doing that, I see a question from Catherine. Determining indicators is key. How do you best determine them? Yes, Catherine, you're absolutely right with your question. We used this set of indicators, high-level indicators, these 17 indicators on a local level of the project, for all our projects. So that's part of the answer. We used these 17 indicators for all our projects because we wanted to compare also the sustainability performance of these different transform projects. But as I mentioned, I think trying to define precisely what we meant then with human rights for that particular project really required the project team, the multi-stakeholder project team, to be very specific on, okay, but what is it then that we find important when it comes to human rights in this project? What could we work on? What do others feel that we need to work on, and what have we worked on? And Renee is asking, share about the work done on projects to get to place of having connected complemental values. And John's asking, Sander, who developed the indicators? Stakeholder coalition, were they adapted from elsewhere? Trying to combine all these. This list of indicators was built both bottom up and top down. We asked a consultancy organization to look at all the work that our project teams already did in terms of identifying what values mattered most in their project. So the first thing we asked all our project teams is come up with a list of values, a list of indicators that matter to your project, in your context, in your situation, in your value network. This consultancy that we hired used all that input to come up with a more generic framework. And this is the generic framework. And we gave this generic framework back to our project teams. And we said, this is a framework that we think we can work with in all our projects. And maybe this framework will help you in even further defining or elaborating on the lists of values and the list of indicators that you've formulated with your project team. And I think in all the cases it really worked like this, because they thought, oh, we didn't talk about biodiversity on a company level. Hey, that's something that might even help us, and yeah, we've missed that. And in some cases it even meant that people said, hey, but wait a minute, we probably missed the whole landscape part, because there's no one in our project team that is working on landscape issues. And in some cases it meant that the project team was broadened, and someone with that new skills and expertise was being added to the project team. And resolving value conflicts, and Renee, I meant complementary values. You used the word complementary today. Is this the same as connected values referred to as? Yes, Chris. Yes, Renee. I do mean connected values. And I said that the values can act as complements. They can only act as complements if we are able to connect them. Or only connected values will act as complements. Otherwise, it will be sort of a value in isolation. While in the case of Ron Deal, it was the fact that they invested in animal welfare that made a result in a higher margin or a better price for their eggs. So this is really the way to look at things. Ron Deal never said this is important and we're going to do it. No, they said we have to integrate this into our story, and only if it's an integral part of our story, then it will help strengthen our product. So yes, it is about connected values, and connected values act as complements instead of trade-offs. And resolving value conflicts, I'm trying to think of how to answer that question. Value conflicts is the very first stage.
That is a significant issue that we're going to take up.
But a value conflict
in terms of
go ahead, Chris.
The whole idea of real multi-stakeholder engagement, and then also key to that is experimenting in action. So the next 2 weeks we'll be exploring ways in several different senses of taking on the value conflicts.
Thank you for that, Chris. And then I'll keep it very short, and I'll too refer to next week's webinars. But a value conflict is the first stage of a dialogue between different stakeholders. And the conflict is often only perceived on the level of interests, and when you move deeper into a dialogue about that perceived conflict, the conflict can often be solved, or we can find ways around that conflict. But more about that in next week's presentations. So lessons of today. First lesson for me when I was making this, that in our metropolitan environment everything is connected. A more integrated solution, a solution that will integrate all three P's: people, planet, profit, will have a higher impact and a higher systemic impact in this metropolitan environment. That is why we at the university, working with metropolitan food systems, are so focusing so much on sustainability and on triple P value propositions, because only those kind of innovation projects will have that higher systemic impact. Second lesson is that different stakeholders represent different values, and incorporating their values will prove the potential of your initiative to these stakeholders. Think about the example I used from Ron Deal, where, and I shared that with you last week, where the Society for the Protection of Animals was really a part of the project team designing that new hen house and designing that Ron Deal value proposition. And because of that, many of the values that they represented, values related to animal comfort, animal wealth, were really incorporated in the design of the housing system and of that whole value proposition. And it also meant that because of this co-creation with these different stakeholders, there was co-ownership for the Ron Deal. And it even led to co-investment, and I shared that with you last week when I talked about these NGOs using some of their campaign money to do a pro-Ron Deal campaign on National Public Radio. And instead of commenting on a project in terms of what was wrong, they were really saying to consumers, go buy this project. This is one of the most sustainable projects in the world. So these different values, again, it's people who represent these different values, even though there's values from these different domains. So the best way to make sure that you have all the values at your table is to make sure you have a good multi-stakeholder team, and then you can come up with an integrated solution, and an integrated solution that will prove of relevance and of proof of success to all these different stakeholders. And finally, values can act as complements, not just as trade-offs, and a value conflict is often the inspiration for redesign and innovation. And then, Renee, I'm back to your question. And Renee, you're asking, so the focus on values of multi-stakeholder undergirds both the innovation and the sustainability. Yes, it undergirds the innovation because these different values shape the need for redesign and also the redesign process. And by incorporating these different values, you are getting closer to a situation where we really have the values of all these three domains, from the people domain, the planet domain, and the profit domain, at the table and in your project. If we are able to integrate these different values, then we have come up with an integrated solution, a triple P solution, a triple P value proposition. So those are my lessons for today, and I'm hoping that this helped for you. And
yes, or
slides
again,
for the assignment.
I'm happy to pick up with these next couple of slides.
Chris, I'm going to do this before we move to
cycling back to questions.
Questions, right?
How about that? Okay. One of the things that I want to pick up on the prior slide is the notion that next week's seminar on multi-stakeholder engagement really takes off from this slide because we're going to be exploring much more explicitly this idea of value conflict and how value conflict in the context of these kind of projects is to be expected and thus has to be managed. and that's really the heart of the whole of next week's webinar. And again, it is a matter of stay tuned. We're going to go deeper into these topics. But I think the important thing about today, as Sanders has laid out here, is that from the very beginning, you have to think about these systemic variables: people, planet, and profit. And you've got to be deliberate in testing your concept, your project concept, that you really are going to be addressing these three outcomes in some significant way, that in fact you're ultimately going to move the dial positively on each of these 3P trajectories. And some of it at this point in your projects may be that you can't come to a what we might think of as economists or people in universities. You're not going to be able to quantify that immediately. You're going to have to start out with some qualitative goals that you can ultimately convert into more measurable things as you proceed in the process of developing and implementing your project. So 3 questions come out of today, and perhaps this is the hardest set of questions we've posed yet for an assignment. Describe how your project will create value in each of the sustainability dimensions: people, planet, and profit. And for this first one, I really am interested in having you do that qualitatively. You know, thinking about how will this concept that we're working on benefit people, benefit the planet, benefit profit. Then the second question: what criteria will you use to assess sustainability performance? It's the second criteria then that asks you to think more deeply about the measurement issue. Again, at this point in the life of developing your project, these criteria may also be more qualitative than quantitative, but the thing is, how are we going to look at our project and know that we have addressed these 3 dimensions, that we have created value in the way in which we suggested in responding to the first bullet here of the assignment? And then finally, if you cannot create value in every dimension, in other words, the third bullet actually presupposes that you may find it easier to take on 1 or 2 of the dimensions, and the third one will sort of be the weaker one in terms of your planning. Now again, our intention here is to say all 3 should be strong, all 3 should have criteria. But if you discover that one of these dimensions in particular is giving you trouble, then what alternative exists to ensure the sustainable development of the project once it's implemented? In other words, if you can't imagine or can't come up with a strong answer to one element of the triple P proposition, how can you embed within your plan further developing the weaker P, as it were, as you move forward with the implementation of your project? So here is where we really get down, and remember, this is a test of potential. If your concept idea has real potential, then you need to be able to express the value proposition in regard to this. The people, planet, profit the notion of criteria, and the notion that even when you're going to struggle perhaps with one of the three dimensions, how are you going to continue to develop that as you develop the project concept. At this point then, I'll just remind you that next week, and hopefully we've set up lots of questions for next week, managing stakeholder engagement, and we're really going to delve fairly deeply into those aspects. Recall that the project concept's behind us. We've now moved on to the tests of potential, and the first test of potential is, can your project concept really support a strong statement of 3P value creation? And then next week we're going to say, is your project concept strong enough to really engage the multi-stakeholders that you're going to need to carry out the work? So each week we're digging deeper into the material, and I'm just reading Catherine's comment here. I assume most projects don't yet have true multi-stakeholder engagement. Therefore, how we meet these assignments may be based on limited opinions and values, and that's part of the message that I'm going to be delivering next week, Catherine. So your comment is absolutely is right on, and so we will delve into perhaps the messiest part of the work of testing the potential of your project concept. So that says, yes, I apparently pressed backwards a couple of times. So with that in mind, we sort of bring this session to a close, and we have good time here today to entertain questions and comments. And I know the slide says today's material, but we're also, since we had difficulty technically getting up and running on the follow-up discussion on last week's material, we would also like to entertain that. And so we will open the floor, and hopefully the last few minutes of my summing things up and looking ahead allow, excuse me, ladies and gentlemen, I couldn't mute my sneeze fast enough, but in any event, hopefully you've had a few things pop into mind that you'd like to ask us at this point. So we're just going to quietly await the questions, and I see Sanders already been tackling some in the chat box. And Sander, I will turn over the primary questioning to you, or the primary answers to you, since you were the presenter both last week and this week.
And my mic is on again. So I just just read John Warburg's comment in the chat box who said that I talked about less resources, and he would like people to clarify that we don't have less resources, we have finite resources, but in a growing population each person's fair share is going to be smaller, which also provides opportunity. Yeah, that's true. Um, and John, you're right, and I put that comment in the chat box too. There is of course discussion that we are experiencing a situation that we have less fresh water, and we need to start purifying water and things like that. But in
Yes, hi,
general, I think
Sandra.
John, you're absolutely
I
right.
have a question
I see
regarding the
John Stone
assignments
has
now,
raised his hand.
and so I just want to ask if this is in reference to the criteria or the indicators rather from I'm not sure what slide that it was that you had the list of indicators, and Catherine had indicated, well, this would be key, and then you clarified that the list of indicators was derived from measurements pertaining to past transform projects, and then the stakeholder coalitions were allowed to look at these and then adapt them or add to them, at least if I understood that correctly. Is that what you're asking here and in this assignment? And if so, should that list of indicators that was derived from the transform experience be used as a springboard for this assignment?
Well, thanks for that question, John, and I'm happy to clarify. I would say that that if this list of indicators that Transform came up with, if that helps you, please do use it. If it doesn't help you, do not use it, because we have made this list in the Dutch context, in the Dutch situation, and if it does not fit or fit your situation in your context well enough, please do not use the list, because then it will only block things instead of opening your mind to things. So in general, I would say start with the discussion that you are having already in your group, or the ideas that you have in your mind, and the values that you're explicitly working on. And if today's presentation has given you new insights on how to incorporate other values, more planet values, more people values, or more profit values, then we have certainly made a big step today. And if for that reason the list of indicators that Transform came up with helps, use it. If not, do not use it.
I think I would add to that, and I would agree wholeheartedly with Sander. It's really with this assignment that I think you begin to be creative about how you look at these dimensions. And I wish I could tell you that there were a very well recognized common set of criteria for sustainability. And as a matter of fact, part of my opening comments next Tuesday are going to explain why that probably actually isn't even possible. And therefore, it is a matter of thinking about your context, your project, and what would make meaningful impacts in your context in terms of moving people, moving planet, moving profit in the directions you want to see them move.
Chris, I see a comment from Salome in Nairobi. that wants to get feedback on the assignment. Maybe you or John can comment on that. And while you're thinking about your answer, I also see a comment from John Warback saying a few of us have begun dropping the term sustainable development, which has a long and high level history, for development for sustainability, which puts the emphasis on sustainability and all three P's, not development, which could be interpreted as focusing on the profit aspect of the three P's. Well, John, it's funny that you're saying that. We had a discussion in the Netherlands that many business people said that the whole development component felt that it was, for them, it felt that it was focused too much on community development and not so much about business development. So again, maybe an indicator that perceptions can be quite different based on where you're standing and what kind of stakeholder you are. I think the general concern, of course, we share that it should really be about the different values, and it is the combination of these three values and the balance between these three value domains that shape a successful project.
Yes.
So indeed, different values that need to be recognized.
Very shortly get
John or
to
Chris, can you
feedback,
answer
to people.
the question
I
from Salome?
began to develop feedback yesterday and this morning, and unfortunately, I presume I'm still trying to figure out D2L. I wasn't able to properly post the feedback. So Salome, you should expect something something over the next couple of hours, actually, that I will be posting the feedback as soon as I figure out what my glitch is in getting the feedback posted. So I apologize, and we're going to work to straighten that out in the next couple of hours.
So are there any more questions today from the participants that Chris, John, or I should comment on or respond to? Just put them in the chat box now.
Yeah, again, as is true,
and I don't see anybody typing.
There is a coaching session Thursday morning from 8 to 10. And I would echo Catherine's comment, Sander. You do rock, and thank you. And again, we will go through the coaching session then on Thursday morning. I unfortunately will be unable to join you on Thursday morning, but Sander will be available to move things ahead. So with that, I think we're going to sign off for today. Thank you all.